You're listening to the Journey podcast. Have you ever wondered how internal conflicts can become the root cause of mental health challenges? Find out more in this episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we venture into the intricate terrain of internal conflicts and their profound impact on mental health and well-being. We explore the intricate web of emotions, thoughts, and beliefs that can often lead to inner discord. Our guest, drawing from her expertise, offers valuable insights into recognizing, understanding, and effectively managing these internal conflicts. We uncover how these conflicts can manifest in various aspects of our lives, affecting our relationships, decision-making, and overall sense of self. Meet Faye Lawand. She's not your average expert. She's the go-to guru for smashing internal conflicts and finding your chill. Imagine having 3 burnouts and turning that chaos into a powerhouse of healing wisdom. That's Faye's story. Hailing from the Middle East and having called 13 countries home, Faye's been around the block and burnout knows no boundaries in her world. Picture this. Her first burnout hits on a Caribbean island. You know, the place people go to escape stress, not to find it. Then, the Israeli Invasion of Lebanon in 2006 became a turning point, sparking Faye's deep dive into the world of internal conflicts. Now, she's not just any old coach. Faye's a trauma-informed clinical hypnotherapist, stress response regulation expert, and a nervous system specialist. Yeah, she's got the fancy titles and the skills to back them up. No meds, no endless meditation, and definitely no hours of talk therapy. Faye is all about evidence-based methods to kick exhaustion and pain to the curb. But here's the cool part. Faye's not just about healing individuals. She's on a mission to make the world a kinder and happier place, one person at a time. Her 3-step mental health blueprint is the roadmap to inner peace, confidence, and control. Here's my interview with Faye Lawand. Hi, Faye. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because internal conflicts and mental health is such an impactful topic for today's episode. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Petra. It's really lovely to be here with you and your listeners. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I have a feeling we will get into some great material today, and what an important topic for today's world. So yeah, can't wait to get into it. And do you want to share a little bit about yourself, your story, your background, and how you came to do what you do today?
Yes, with pleasure. So I'm an internal conflict resolution expert, and I know it sounds like a mouthful. And people are always curious about what internal conflict resolution is, and how does one come to be an internal conflict resolution expert? And basically, an internal conflict resolution is all about resolving the inner turmoil, like the internal chaos that gets in the way of us living and feeling the way we want to feel. And it would come as no surprise to you and your listeners that I got into this line of work because I was seeking solutions that work for my own mental health issues and health issues where the medical establishment actually had nothing viable to offer. And, I never aspired when I was 12, 13, 14, and my teacher asked me in high school, what do I want to be when I grow up? I never raised my hand and said, I want to be an internal conflict resolution expert. But, I had a series of the 3 burnouts. And for anybody who's either suffered from a burnout or knows somebody who's suffered from a burnout, you know that burnout is more than just a feeling of tiredness and depleted energy. Although that's the most obvious manifestation of it, burnout always coexists with other mental health issues as well. There's anxiety or depression, there's chronic pain, there's issues with sleep, digestion, immunity. There's a horrible toxic relationship with oneself, a really racing mind. Life is not fun at all when the nervous system is in a burnout stage. So, when my nervous system went into that burnout stage multiple times over the course of my life, I was not satisfied with what was on offer by the establishment. And so I sought out my own solutions that are long lasting, that are natural, that don't involve medication, that don't involve going over and over and over, the problem repeatedly in a therapy situation. And that worked. And that's when I came to realize, after doing a lot of work on myself, that really, if we don't resolve the inner turmoil, the inner battles, the inner conflicts that are taking the nervous system to that place of persistent and chronic sympathetic activation, we've really missed the point. And this is why, like things like meditation alone don't work, or using your essential oils alone don't work, or your breath work alone don't work, because you're not working with the part of the system that actually is targeted and impacted by these internal conflicts. So I hope that's given you a little bit of like a backstory and about internal conflict resolution and how I got there and how it can help.
Yeah. What an amazing journey. And you touched on so many important points there. So I look forward to unpacking some of those. And I'm curious, as you're talking and you went into burnout 3 times. Now,
Hmm.
how does one get into the state of unresolved internal conflicts that then kind of move into chronic stress or burnout? How do we even get into these situations? Are there certain things that we are doing or not doing? What puts us there?
That's a really good point, because when you find out where I had my first burnout, that dispels the biggest myth of all about burnout, that burnout is about the job, or burnout's about the to-do list, or burnout is about the fast pace of life. I mean, surely all of those things don't contribute to a quality, to quality life, especially over a prolonged period of time. I had my first burnout when I was living in Curacao, which is a beautiful island in the Caribbean. I had my first burnout, Petra, where people go to escape their troubles. And so my point is that it's not about your external environment. That's the point I'm trying to make. I had my first burnout in an idyllic Caribbean paradise because the nervous system internally was in turmoil. The nervous system was in dysregulation. So what leads a nervous system, and it's not us who have a burnout, it's our nervous systems that eventually run out of fuel, they run out of steam, and they go into freeze or shutdown mode. And what takes our nervous systems to freeze and shutdown mode is persistent chronic stress. It's not stress, but it's the consistent biochemistry of stress over a prolonged period of time, over, in my case, it was over decades. And this is all very subconscious. We're not aware of the impact of certain life events that really overwhelmed our nervous system and overwhelmed us emotionally without the resources to either process these emotions and these life experiences, or the wisdom to know that we need to do something about them. I think our culture, I was raised in Canada and North America. So, I was very much part of that culture of doing, and that over glorification of like doing and toughing it up and go, 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 go. And, in short bursts, there's nothing wrong actually with being in doing mode and, with putting on a brave face, there's nothing wrong with it in short bursts of time. But if this is your MO and this is the way you do life, while internally there's a different reality, there's going to be a conflict internally. Like what? Literally, there's going to be an internal battle. And any time that there's an internal battle or an internal conflict, there's stress hormones. That requires energy to keep going. And eventually the system runs out of energy. And this is really what burnout is. It's the system has run out of fuel and there's nothing left in the tank anymore. And this is why then all of those other co-symptoms of burnout show up. because, the mental health aspect is very much, well, the poor mental health very much coexists with burnout. And so to summarize, the system gets into burnout by dysregulation, nervous system dysregulation that comes from chronic periods of stress over prolonged periods of time and inner turmoil that isn't looked at and that isn't resolved.
Yeah. Make a good point there. I'm imagining you sitting on the beach and experiencing burnout. And the usual thing in my own situation as well, when you get to that point, is to say, well, you just need to get over it. You just have to suck it up and get through it. And many people try to, and especially in the North American culture, many women also, they really do try to just function through these situations.
And that makes it worse.
Yeah,
And that makes it a
exactly.
lot worse. Battling through it makes it a lot worse.
Yeah.
And very much when the system, see, I always, always make a point with my clients to say, it's not you that is in burnout, it's your nervous system that's in burnout. Because I think it's a symptom of the nervous system being in shutdown mode and, mental health issue. When you're in that mental health crisis, for you to over identify with the condition and create an internal narrative that's very disempowering that actually takes you even deeper into that hole. So I think it's really important to remind ourselves that we are not in burnout. We are not depressed. We are not anxious. It's our nervous system that is in that state. And it creates a little bit of space. But so my point is, when I was sitting at the beach, with the nervous system and burnout, it was very much what you were saying. It's like, Faye, what's wrong with you? I mean, look at where you live. People killed to come here in order to get over their life's woes. There must be something wrong with you. And anytime you have that type of thought pattern repeatedly, you're actually creating so much internal emotional toxicity that will actually drive the nervous system even deeper into that toxic shame and into that burnout shutdown mode. Yeah.
Yeah. Familiar spiral. And you went through that 3 times. So,
Yeah, 3 times because I didn't know how to come out.
yeah. Yeah.
Because the first time that I went through it and the diagnosis wasn't burnout, the diagnosis was depression and PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. And I completely dismissed both of those diagnoses because one of the myths that I always believed to be true about depression is depression only hits negative, pessimistic people. And I'm like, I can't be depressed because, I have a cheerful, positive disposition. I see the cup as being half full. People like me can't be depressed. But when you understand that depression is not about an imbalance of chemicals in the brain, that is a symptom of what happens. When you begin to understand that depression is a very dysregulated system that's gone into freeze mode, then you understand it has nothing to do with personality and everything to do with nervous system overwhelm that comes from an accumulation and pile up of unresolved internal conflicts. So any personality can have life experiences that create inner turmoil that aren't resolved. It has nothing to do with personality. Well, I wish somebody had told me that 16 years ago, because this happened 16 years ago. I didn't know that. And then the other diagnosis that was given was post-traumatic stress disorder. And again, I completely dismissed that as a complete, load of baloney, because I'm like, I have had nothing traumatic happen to me. I've had such a good life. And again, because you say, most of your listeners live in the modern West, I think this is really, really important to understand, because this was part of my internal conflict. I mean, I was born into a war zone, Petra. I was born into a war zone. I was born in the Middle East, like right before the start of that civil war in Lebanon that spanned, decades. And there were hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. Millions got displaced. And I was part of that millions that got displaced. And because we left the war zone early-ish, like I was about 5.5, 6, what I always heard and told myself and believed to be true is that I was never affected by the conflict and the chaos, right? And while I had no conscious memories, because it was, I was still quite young, the nervous system, those memories were imprinted onto the nervous system, those experiences, early experiences of chaos and confusion were imprinted into the nervous system. And then I ended up, living in European countries, in Greece and Cyprus, eventually immigrating to Canada and the United States, where life is very, very good. But what I did not know is that even though I left the area of conflict early, the patterns of internal conflict followed me to all of these very peaceful countries and blissful locations like Curacao until eventually they had that spillover effect. And what happens a lot when a nervous system is in dysregulation is, because so many of us have really privileged lives, we tend to downplay any of the other symptoms that are associated with these nervous system dysregulations and shame ourselves for feeling either negative or overwhelmed because we say, well, my life is so good. There must be something wrong with me if I have it so good, and this is what's going on. And my message, if that is you, my message is, especially if your life is so good and you're having those other feelings on the inside, that is a telltale sign of your nervous system in dysregulation, because your life is telling you that you should be feeling one way, but your nervous system is stuck in another way. And that's a telltale sign that you need to align the two so that your nervous system is speaking in the same positive way that your external life circumstances reflect.
Yeah, that's really good point.
I dismissed that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, because I'm like, no, nothing traumatic has ever happened to me. But, and it took me many, 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 many years after that to actually understand that trauma isn't an event. It can be. Like in my situation, of course, the trauma was in the war, but trauma is any overwhelming life experience that makes you feel yucky on the inside. Like Dr. Gabor Mate tells us that trauma isn't in the event, it's what happens inside, when something yucky happens on the outside. And so trauma can be, a horrible breakup. Trauma can be being bullied. I mean, in my practice, I see this all the time, either being bullied at school or being bullied at work or being bullied at home, being bullied by kids, being bullied by a partner. But trauma can also have been emotional neglect. Trauma can be not having your needs met. Trauma can be financial difficulties. So, trauma is any overwhelming life experience that leaves you with a really yucky feeling on the inside. And that can happen to anyone, anywhere. This is my point. If it can happen to Prince Harry, if it can happen in a royal family, then no nervous system is immune to it because it's a nervous system response. It does not know palaces or Caribbean locations. All it knows is body signals. Did that answer your question? Which now I forgot.
Absolutely. No, I love how you explain this because often we wait for these major events to sit down and say, oh, this happened to me. Somebody passed away in my life or something major. I had a car accident. But there's so many little things that accumulate through our lifetime, often in childhood. And we're not, like you weren't really aware of that. And we have patterns that result from that we don't know how to explain because we don't consciously remember that. Now, you mentioned before,
don't consciously remember it.
Yeah, you mentioned before that doing meditation alone is not really effective. Breath work alone isn't really effective. So after 3 burnout cycles, did you find something that helped you overcome this?
Yes, totally. And so, because 16 years ago when this happened, and I was given the diagnosis, it's like, okay, so what do I do about it? And the doctor said, well, we'll put you on medication. And he suggested that I go see I think it was a psychoanalyst or a psychotherapist, because he explained that there could be a psychosomatic root to what's going on. I mean, now I definitely know that that's true. And so at the time I thought, yes, sure, that kind of sounds like it would be impactful and powerful, but it was the wrong approach because it was, I don't know if you've ever been to see a psychoanalyst or a psychotherapist, because it was constantly going round and round in circles talking about, what wasn't working in my life instead of providing me a pathway forward that would uplift me. So I would leave every session actually feeling worse than when I walked in. So after 3 sessions of that and saying no to the antidepressants, I'm like, okay, I have no solutions. Like, I don't know what to do about this and I feel lousy. So I started a journey, Petra, 16 years ago. It was a journey of me just studying and learning and reading and researching and applying it on myself. And a lot of stuff didn't work. I mean, I had no system to follow. I had no guidance, no mentors, no coaches, no community, no accountability. I was doing it on my own. And I think this is why I had 3 burnouts, because I didn't know what I was doing. The underlying issues were not resolved. And this is why the patterns kept repeating themselves. And so after, a series of trainings and workshops and experimentations, trial and error on me in order to resolve my symptoms, when the symptoms were finally resolved, and not just the mental health systems, but this is something which is really important to keep in mind. The nervous system that does anxiety or depression or chronic pain and burnout is the same nervous system that does self-sabotaging patterns in your romantic relationships, is the same nervous system that you go with to work and that, does issues with the co-workers and the boss, is the same nervous system that is, gossiping with friends and having, issues with, it's the same nervous system. So it was like, everything wasn't right in my world, not just my mental health. I mean, that was a symptom. The mental health was a symptom, and the physical health situation was a symptom of a life in shambles. So when things came right, not only did they come right with my mental health and my physical symptoms, but they came right across all areas of my life, because this is what happens when you balance and regulate your nervous system. So Petra, when that happened, I coded everything that worked on my own journey and put it into one blueprint, the mental health blueprint, that has 3 steps in order to overcome the poor mental health, exhaustion, and pain without medication and without talk therapy. And without meditation. And so here are the 3 steps. I'm not bashing meditation. The reason why I say without meditation is because meditation alone will not get you out, or will not get your nervous system out of that hole. And at times, meditation alone, if you're doing the wrong type of meditation, can put a nervous system deeper into rumination. And this is why I say without meditation. So the 3 steps of my mental health blueprint to overcome poor mental health, exhaustion, and pain are: the first one, support your nervous system. And this is so important because these issues are all symptoms of a dysregulated nervous system. So you've got to support the nervous system. And there's many ways to do that. The second step in the 3-step blueprint is to conquer the inner turmoil. There is no way you can overcome these chronic conditions if internally there is a battle going on. Like, it's just not possible. And a lot of people, when they hear my story, they either relate to it or they don't, And when they don't relate to it, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry you've lived through a war. And it's like multiple wars, because I got caught up in these war zones multiple times over my life. They either relate to it or they don't. And then if they don't relate to it, they're like, I've never experienced war or anything like that. To which I say, well, it's wonderful that you haven't lived through an actual physical war. But I truly believe we all live an internal battle of some sort. And if you are experiencing these chronic conditions, most likely there's an internal battle going on that you're not aware of with your conscious mind, but that your nervous system and your subconscious mind remember and are storing and are manifesting to you through these symptoms of chronic pain, poor mental health, so on and so forth. So critical to overcome the inner turmoil. And the last piece of the blueprint is to eliminate chronic stress. It's not managed stress. And I think this is one of the biggest myths that we've been sold, and one of the worst ways in which we've been hypnotized. We've all been hypnotized to believe that stress is harmful. You go to the doctor and like, oh, you need to manage your stress. Stress is harmful. No, it's not. Stress is not harmful. Chronic stress is harmful. Yes, but stress is actually very beneficial. And the new science from Stanford University and the new science of stress by Kelly McGonigal actually points to the plethora of benefits of stress when it is not chronic. And so one of the best things that you can do for yourself is educate yourself about the new stress responses, about the new benefits of stress, and also educate yourself on how you can eliminate chronic stress, because that's what's going to kill you, not stress. And so, in summary, the 3 steps of the mental health blueprint are support the nervous system, overcome the inner turmoil, and eliminate chronic stress.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And once I applied those, then everything came
Then it
right.
worked.
But, it took me a long time to figure out what those things are
Yeah.
because there was nobody to guide me.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that is the experience that many, many listeners and people on the planet have, is they run into these situations and there isn't much help available in traditional healthcare settings for them. So, yeah. Well, wonderful that you've developed that.
Yeah, I feel so fortunate that now I'm able to do for other women what no one was able to do for me when, like, my life was so dark and so scary and so lonely. I think, one of the worst things of these conditions is how isolating and lonely it can feel, especially when your life is good. There's just so much shame about even verbalizing that there's something that's not working. And then, not knowing what to do about it. So for me, it is such a privilege and such an honor to be able to do for other women what I was desperate for somebody to do for me all those years ago. And just one thing about, what you said earlier about the traditional solutions failing us or something like that, I came across a statistic which is pretty horrifying, but would probably ring true. And that is, it comes from Peter Levin and Dr. Gabor Mate, who are world-renowned trauma experts and trauma resolution experts. And the statistic is that 90%, 90% of all doctors' visits today have are due to unexplained causes, which means that 9 out of 10 of us, when we're going to see a doctor, we're not feeling okay. When we leave that doctor's office, there's no actual medical explanation for why we're feeling lousy, and therefore no solution.
Yeah.
And so all of these people, so many of us are suffering needlessly. And with this pandemic, and now it's been labeled a pandemic, a mental health pandemic globally post-COVID, so many of us are in that statistic. And we're suffering needlessly. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this work, and I speak so passionately, and I'm so passionate about this mental health blueprint, is that you don't need to suffer alone. Don't need to suffer needlessly, because it's very easy to come out of this situation when you know what you're doing and you're targeting the issue at the level at which it's created and stored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important point right there. Very often we don't actually address the root cause when we seek help, but there's no explanation for that, right? We're not looking in the right place. So, yeah, wonderful.
And the establishment isn't modeled on root cause diagnosis and root cause therapies.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if listeners have gotten curious about your blueprint and they want to know how they can work with you or how they can get a hold of you, what do you have on offer for them? Do you have programs, services? How can listeners work with you?
Yes, thank you so much for asking. I have all of the above. So I've got a free Facebook group called the Mental Health Collective. That's where we really unpack a lot of these elements of the mental health blueprint, and it's a free membership. I also have a 30-day nervous system well-being calendar to help you achieve that first step of the blueprint, which is to support your nervous system. And I'm very happy to provide that so you can link listeners to it. And I also have one-on-one programs and packages that all come with a full money-back guarantee, by the way. And I've never had to issue a refund since I started doing this work, because the system is fail-proof and it works. And I also have group coaching programs, and I have a group coaching program starting in the new year in February, which is a 66-day container to support the nervous system to achieve that first step of the 3-step process, because really you cannot overcome these conditions without anchoring your nervous system in a felt sense of safety and a felt sense of groundedness. And so over 66 days, and the reason why it's 66 days, by the way, is because the new research tells us that it takes 66 days, not 21 days, to truly automate a behavior. And I want you, when you come out of this container program, to have automated the practices and the behaviors that will really set up your nervous system for regulation.
Yeah, that sounds
And you can
amazing.
find me through my website and my social media handles are just my name, Faye Lawand.
Perfect. And we will be linking to all of Faye's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can get a hold of her, join her Facebook group, or work with her if this episode has inspired you to do so. And this has been another incredible episode. And I really hope our listeners have enjoyed our journey into internal conflicts and mental health today as much as I have. I have learned so many new things in the past half hour. Thank you so
Petra,
much
I'm
for
thrilled.
coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you for having me. Thank you for what you're doing in the world. This is really, really important work.
Oh,
Really
you
important
as
work to
well.
provide listeners with, alternative perspectives to help them on their journey.
Yeah, such an
Yeah.
important thing to give access to all of the
Yeah.
methods and techniques that are available. So, yeah, thank you for this amazing work you're doing, Faye. Have
Thank
a
you,
lovely
Petra. It was a
day. And yeah,
real pleasure to connect.
thank you so much and take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.